Bienvenidos. Buenas noches, buenos días, buenas tardes, dependiendo de cuando estén escuchando este listener. Este es Jesús Hoyos de CRM in Latin America. This is Jesus Hoyos from CRM in Latin America, and today we have, this is the every other week that we have Esteban Kolsky. He's the SAP Chief Evangelist for CX. Okay. And we have Peter Ryan from Ryan Advisory, Strategy Advisory Consulting, everything BPO, outsourcing, nearshoring worldwide, but he has a local expertise in Latin America as well. So like everybody, if you're listening for the first time, we're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter right now. Eventually, this is going to be on my podcast, everywhere where you listen to your podcast. And if I get the time, it will go upload. It will be uploaded on Instagram. The idea today is to have a very casual conversation about what does it mean from the BPO perspective, from nearshoring perspective, to do customer experience for both if you're a company who wants to expand into Latin America, or you're a company who needs to hire the services for Latin America to provide those services that you do in the United States or Europe, or depending where you are. And from the BPO perspective, what does it mean to expand my customer experience services and what that really means. So I'm going to let Peter first introduce himself, and then Esteban, and then, we'll have the first questions, and let's have this conversation.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Jesus, great to see you again. It has been, I'd say, a long-lasting friendship that we've had over the years, and I'm very conscious in the fact that we've met each other many, many times, but never in our actual hometowns. I'm coming to everybody today from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, where we're finally getting above the freezing line. Indeed, I am the founder and the chief analyst at Ryan Strategic Advisory, and couldn't be happier to be here with both of you guys today to talk about some very, I think, interesting trends that we're seeing in the market, and to have a bit of an exchange about how the CX industry is going to play forward as we move into what hopefully will be a post-vaccine environment.
Esteban, who are you?
That's what my mom keeps asking me. Every time I show up. Esteban Kolsky, I'm the Chief Evangelist for SAP CX, and my role in this world is to try to generate conversations about customer experience that don't go into definitions, that don't go into product or anything like that, but just a general aspect. Why should companies worry, and what are the topics and the trends that really matter, basically? And this is going to be a great conversation. Putting in my 2 cents before I'm actually decked out by Jesus and you speaking about everything that you know about. I love to get this whole conversation going somehow in the direction of how does employee empowerment through BPO and how does customer experience strategies overlap, and what we can do to improve that. So throwing in my 2 cents before anything else, Kabir.
Yeah, so Latin America, has been a really good market, for BPOs, call center outsourcing, nearshoring, software development, and there are many trends, depending on there's different pockets and hubs, of providing these services, from Argentina, the Andean countries, Central America and Mexico, and customer experience has been evolving, because of the pandemic, and it's still, customers are still requiring that companies understand, who they are, and one of the big trends that we can see out there, from restaurants to healthcare, banking, fintech, is that we need to get closer to the customer. We need to find out a way through the cloud, especially, be sure that we let the customer, we need to go to where they are, and that changes, the structure sometimes of how you do, call centers, how you expand, the call center into the BPO, how you do nearshoring, software development, low code, no code, how to use, messaging, how to deploy services to close the last mile, e-commerce BPO, for fulfillment, and even the first mile, putting together a store, where you need to provide the marketing services as well. So, and there are some challenges in there from CX in Latin America. So, Peter, what do you see? What are the trends or people, what people are asking you from the BPO perspective from a company somewhere in the United States and wants to buy services from Latin America? What are the big key trends that you see today?
It's a great question, and I'd say that probably one of the most important trends that we're seeing as it pertains to Latin America or anywhere in the American nearshore is something you touched on, Jesus, and that is the desire on the part of the clients of outsourcers to try and get a little bit closer to home. This is something that we were picking up before the pandemic started a year or so back. But there was definitely, I think, amongst executives, and anybody who works in the call center business knows that there's a lot of fatigue in terms of having to travel literally 24, 36 hours to get to a destination where the contact center might be running offshore. Very, very difficult in terms of managing time zones, in terms of managing different climates, different food, and quite frankly, health issues as well. I mean, that amount of flying in those distances, and in many cases, very short times, really is not conducive to good health. Now, that aside, one of the things that I think that we've really been noticing the last little bit is Latin America being a driver, not just in terms of being a great location where American consumers can count on a very strong interaction, whether it's in English or in Spanish, but equally the accessibility of Latin America is, I think, going to be a very important element going into the rest of 2021 and into 2022. And let's just make some comparisons here, guys. Think about if somebody wanted to access Monterrey, Mexico from New York or from Dallas or from Chicago, you're talking no more than about maybe a 3-hour, 4-hour flight. Now compare that with, say, Johannesburg, which is going to be 15, 16 hours direct from the East Coast. Manila, which could easily be 24 to 30 hours, or Mumbai, which could be 15 hours. There's a big difference there in terms of not necessarily having to adjust to different time zones, climates, and spending all that time on a plane. You're able to get in and out of the location you need to go to. You are able to do what you need to do in a concise amount of time. And given the proximity, again, using the example of Monterrey, and there's lots of different spots in Latin America, you're going to have that level of, I think, cultural and commercial familiarization between the agent and the United States and the consumer they're servicing that you just can't get in that overseas dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, and I see, Monterrey, Guadalajara, and when you look at Central America, you have, hubs in travel hubs, with Panama, with Copa Airlines, Avianca in Salvador, that makes you move, in the area, and of course, Avianca in Colombia, and then, Copa in Peru, and then you have Latam, that makes it very accessible, to go through, to get to your destination. But saying that, what does it mean, to have that talent, okay, in the same time zone? Because one of the key things that I thought, during the pandemic, that, the higher education market will definitely start, to dissipate, go away somehow. But it's picking up, okay, and you see, American universities deploying, their services, local and virtually through Latin America, and you see, companies like, Harvard, MIT, Emeritus, providing, academic programs because they want to educate the people locally. And you can get easily, a student from the UNAM, which is, the public university out of Mexico, speaking perfect English. Yeah. So you get that talent, local talent, evolving, and then, I see that trend. Then I see the other trend, and I want to pick on Medellin, which I talked to you before, Peter. I see a lot of traction of people moving to Medellin, from the States, because there is local talent who can do, machine learning, AI, and they're providing that in BPO services or call center services as well. How do you see that talent growing? Because it's something that we're going to need. I mean, globally, we need that talent from marketing, from doing the call centers, from doing messaging, delivery, all the way down to closing the last mile, the logistic point. How do you see that?
We've touched on a few things there. Each one of them, I think, is absolutely vital to the success of Latin America as we move forward, with Latam being a location of choice to service the USA. Let's start with the linguistics, and I think you're spot on. You can find near native fluency in many parts of Latin America, and I would argue the further north you come in Mexico, you get to a level of actual native language fluency. In fact, guys, one thing I'll tell you that we're picking up on at Ryan Strategic Advisory and the work we're doing is there's a huge amount of interest right now in looking at communities like Tijuana or Mexicali by large global outsourcers, because they're looking to try and access a level of English language coupled with a level of Spanish language that's fluent on both sides. Now, take into account what you were saying, Jesus, about the capabilities that are going to be required for CX delivery moving forward. And you're absolutely correct. I think that the locations that are going to be under the microscope more and more are going to be the ones that are multifunctional. And the example you use of Medellin is great. You can find people that are able to provide digital or voice interactions, but you're also able to find the talent that can develop solutions in terms of the technology that goes into the contact center, and then to manage those solutions as well. You're finding more and more locations in Latin America, technology hubs, where you can have the front end delivery, but you can also have that back end where you can count on all the different types of platforms that are going to be required to be potentially developed or managed from these locations. And I think what this is pointing to is a desire on the part of the buying community, individuals that are going to work with the outsourcers, to say to the outsourcers, if you're going to be in the nearshore or in the offshore, we're not interested in just a simple, cheap location where you can find lots of agents that can manage this work. We want a location where there's going to be quality individuals who are going to be servicing the front lines, who've got great language skills, great commercial acumen, and are problem solvers. And we want people who are going to be able to manage some of the back end elements too, whether it's technology or processes. The fact of the matter is, I would say moving forward, the biggest change I believe we're going to see is that while costs will always be a play, it's going to be a substantially less of amount of a play relative to the quality and to the skills that individuals can bring to a job in an offshore and nearshore destination, Latin America or otherwise.
And that actually dovetails really nice with one of the items I'd like to introduce. Right? I mean, forever, as long as I've been doing this, offshoring meant, I'll say it bluntly, poor experience. I mean, the people that were doing the work didn't have the culture of the company doing the work. They didn't have access to the same resources, content, knowledge, you name it, right? And I know that it's been improved greatly, but this is, from the CX perspective, this is one of the biggest problems. And you mentioned the further north you go. I'm not entirely sure that the proximity is as much as the understanding of the American culture and the American experience, right? The concern. So how are you solving the issue for companies of creating a seamless experience end to end, where some of the interactions are delivered and managed by employees and resources that are not part of the corporate culture?
Well, I think that the key thing, Esteban, is training. You've got to have the right training when an agent comes in to work on a campaign. And this could be the training that they get doing a domestic campaign if they're based domestically, or it can be in the nearshore and the offshore. But the idea that they come in and that they're given the right training, using the right techniques to make sure that they aren't just having individuals standing up in front of a whiteboard preaching at them, but really so that they can get a sense about the service or the product that they're going to be supporting, whether it's digitally or via voice, to make sure that they have a full understanding about what they need to do to service and to problem solve. And then I think that it goes beyond just that initial training stage, and that's ongoing training. And this is where I think there's some fantastic advances over the past couple of years. in terms of how ongoing training is deployed. Again, it's not just saying we're going to haul you off the telephones for a week or so and you're going to come get a refresher on service techniques or on the product that you're supporting. Rather, it's a case of learning through interactive sessions, learning through the online some of these online tools that are available. And we hear this more and more, that this helps do a number of things. Number one, it makes sure that people are learning at their own pace. Number two, it makes sure that they're absorbing what they're learning a lot better. And number three, when you've got people who are more comfortable learning and are absorbing more and then putting it into practice on the front lines, there's less attrition, and that ends up lowering the cost. That ends up making sure that you have better long-term seamless experiences. And I think this is where this whole element of training counts, and you can overcome perhaps some of the cultural disconnects or some of the distance disconnects that you might achieve. It all comes down to making sure that when you're putting an individual on the front lines, that they're best equipped as possible to do the job, and that you make sure that they're continued to be trained to do that job.
But how about, so how about the culture? What do you do about the culture? Because this is a critical part that, a lot of people don't understand, right? I mean, we can talk about training for knowledge, and that's perfectly fine, and I'm with you there, right? I have no questions and no qualms on that. But the culture is the thing that becomes a little bit more complicated to train for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how are we handling that?
Look, I mean, I think that we can all agree. We've all seen examples of contact centers, whether it's enterprise or outsource, or where cultures have been have lived up to that impression people have of being a sweatshop, that they have not worked well. And you just see it in the churn numbers. You see it in the attrition numbers. They're absolutely terrible. Where I think you're probably going to see much more of an emphasis moving forward is on culture as it relates to how things are going to be playing out in terms of individuals working together, about how the feedback is provided by the supervisor directly to the agents, about team building, about making sure that individuals understand that they're not just working on their own providing frontline services, they're not just on their own training, but there's solidarity amongst the agent community, and that they can count on one another. And we're seeing this more and more, and not just through, I would say, the traditional types of team building exercises or social gatherings. But one of the things I've seen, guys, that I think has worked really nicely in terms of building that culture and building that level of positivity, the number of organizations that are getting involved in terms of providing impact sourcing or corporate social responsibility initiatives within the communities that they're servicing, and saying to the agents, we'll give you the opportunity, paid time, to go out and plant trees, or to help a community that's in need of potential assistance in some way, shape, or form. And you'll do it together. You'll do it as a team, as part of the exercise that we're running here in the center. That's gone a long way in so many different centers in terms of building that level of culture and building that positivity that the agents need, in terms of understanding that they have got a role in the contact center, that this is a role that's important, not just to their organization, but to the consumers that they're servicing. And there's a final element too in this culture building, and that's career opportunities, and that's understanding that there was a career path. And it's something that's been bandied about in the contact center space as long as I can remember, indicating that every agent has to know that they can move up from the front lines all the way to the executive level, or even the CEO. But I think now more than ever, we're seeing this put into practice, and we're seeing real indications about how organizations that think forward can take raw talent that might have started on the front lines and provide them with the opportunity, the pathway, the training, and the mentorship they need to succeed and to fulfill their careers in a contact center. It's not going to be a stopgap job, but it's actually going to be a career fulfilling opportunity.
Do you see? Sorry, just to finish, but do you see? I don't know how you see this evolving, but it used to be, and it hasn't been, but it used to be. It's coming back again. That leveraging agents to work in different accounts through part of outsourcing. I'm not sure if that's still an issue or not, but some. Again, I haven't done this in a while, but in the old days, we had agents that were like partially responsible for my account, for example, right? So then they were splitting the training and the knowledge and the culture. That's not an issue anymore, from what I learned from my friends in the business. But is that helping resolve some of these issues then?
I think so. It gives individuals much more of a focus in terms of what they're doing. It gives them the opportunity to concentrate on one service or product in one company that they're supporting. And I agree with you. I think that some of these splitting exercises that we saw 10, 15 years ago were
The blended call center.
The blended call center, yeah. I think that did a lot in terms of driving attrition numbers quite high because, we're all hearing now more and more. Anybody who's on LinkedIn has probably seen the post, multitasking doesn't work. I mean, I thought this a long time. And there's always going to be a degree of multitasking in any job. But in terms of providing a core fundamental support mechanism for one client, I think it's very tough to do that if you're doing 2 or 3 concurrently.
Well, that goes back to...
I'm glad to see it, Jason. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
By the way, he's the Godfather. You saw his
I saw the man.
Yeah,
that's why I'm trying to be nice.
It's my favorite movie.
So Peter, you keep talking. You're the Godfather.
You come to my call center and you want to talk to somebody.
You guys know me too well.
Yeah. So to expand into that, you mentioned, multifunctional, cost is not the only factor, and, culture training and, discussing this, the blended call center, not to be multitasking, but today, a lot of the BPOs and, the call centers have to, they're evolving, and they not only they have to manage, the call center software, or whatever part of the BPO they have to do, the logistics, delivering packages, sending out, billing statements, whatever invoices, whatever they're doing behind the scenes for the BPO. Now we're talking that, companies have, ecosystem, they have platforms, so is the call center integrated with the CRM, with integration with WhatsApp? And and you have to segment, do your splits, have your skill-based routing, all that magic stuff. You need to be there. And going back to the culture, and it has to be seamless. That if you have somebody in Iowa making a transfer of a call to Monterrey, Mexico, and then going back to New York for whatever the reason, that needs to be seamless. That needs to be simple. Working eventually in one customer ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the what I see, part of the challenges that I see as companies are moving into Latin America for the BPOs. But at the same time, you have the big trees, creating data centers in Latin America. Querétaro, it's a big hub now for data centers, and you see that as well in Santiago, Chile, some cities in Brazil as well. And how do you see that in order, if I'm in the BPO or I am a company in the States who want to expand, is that present? Do people understand that today? Do I have local data centers, or I have to provide a complete ecosystem in order to fulfill the customer experience? How do you see that today?
Well, I think, it's a really good question. What we're picking up more and more is that there wants that the consumer, not the consumers, but the clients are looking for that complete ecosystem to be provided by the outsourcer. Now that changes the whole dynamic in terms of how the outsourcer can be classed or tiered in the broader context of the competitive set. One of the things, guys, we're picking up, and we're going to be releasing a survey in the next couple of weeks of end users, of end buyers of contact center services. And one of the biggest requirements that they're looking for amongst their BPO partners is the ability to provide solutions on the back of cloud technology. I mean, this is massive right now. And I would say that whole virtualization that's come with the pandemic, the move to virtual working, has also necessitated flexibility in terms of technology working models when it comes to CX. So, Jesus, to make a long story short, I think there's going to be an expectation that you're going to have these omni-channel capabilities that are going to take into account all the different mediums of communication that a consumer wants to work off of when they interact with an enterprise, or the enterprise's representative in the form of an outsourcer. There's going to be a requirement of the analytics and the ability to understand all those interactions and crunch them all together within the scope of the voice and the digital channels. But there's also a sense, I believe, that the way the contact center is going to be operated and the backbone is going to be as virtual and cloud-based as possible moving forward.
And that brings me to one of the the channels that we're all using today, the live streams, video, the Slacks, the Teams, and today, MessageBird, which is a messaging platform, acquire a video company and a CDP company, and that requires the human face, So we're going to see each other more and more from far away. Esteban is in California, I'm in Florida, you're in Montreal, so, that's going to be a challenge, especially for the BPO call center, companies in Latin America, because they have to bring them somehow to a location because of security, and that in Latin America, we have multi-house, the whole family living in one roof, and the internet, the dog barking, the wife yelling, the husband yelling, all that is part of what we're trying to see. So I see it, probably not everybody's going to go back to the call center, but people are going to come back to somewhere to work somehow in a hybrid model. We work, the Starbucks, whatever that is, in order to work together. And it's very interesting because I was talking to a good friend of mine yesterday that, he works in a CPG, food and beverage industry in Latin America, and they're deploying tons of ghost kitchens, to provide, delivery services. But behind that is a big call center. It's a big virtual call center. In order to make sure that you deploy, based on location and skills base, the food. But it's not the food that's going to go to your house. It's the food that's going to go to a bunch of truckers who are somewhere in Mexico that you need to provide the meat, or to a corporation, because the end-to-end services changes. It's not just go to the restaurant and pick up the food, and voila, you have the services. You're expanding. You're creating new distribution models that provide all these services that we're talking about. To be able to see somebody. So how do you see that video technology, the teams, in this environment?
Look, I'll be honest with you. I've been pushing the concept of video support for some time now. The first time I saw it in play was in the UK a few years back, where there was an outsourcer supporting a luxury car manufacturer and doing support via video chat. I've also seen it done in India. I've seen more and more of it, especially over the past year or so. But I think the thing that I'm picking up on is that video chat definitely has a place, but I'm not convinced that we're going to start seeing it go beyond perhaps 20-25% of organizations deploying it. Look, there's a few things at play here. Jesus, you mentioned a comment here about the security aspect. I think a lot of individuals would feel much more comfortable doing video chat if they were based in a contact center with the right equipment and they could guarantee the quality if at all possible. Second thing is, I've talked to organizations deploying video chat as a service, and one of the things that they tell me that I thought that was very interesting, they said there was no shortage amongst their customers of people who were willing to use this as a communications medium, but there was definitely a shortage of agents who didn't necessarily want to be seen on video by the consumers. And this could have a variety of reasons, all of which I think are legitimate. But think about, guys, one of the things that we've been picking up on, I think all of us in the professional communities the past year or so, and that's the concept of what they're calling a Zoom fatigue, and the fact that you spend an excessive amount of time each day doing video chatting, whether it's on Zoom or any other platform, Teams, Skype, what have you. But the point is, people get very tired very quickly interacting in this fashion. You feel like you've always got to be on. You feel like you've always got to be presented well. You feel like you've got to make sure that you've not got any annoying little habits you might be doing in the background subconsciously. And I think for that reason, you're not going to see video necessarily become the most pervasive or one of the most pervasive channels. It's definitely going to be there, especially for higher end type interactions, like we were saying, luxury vehicles, or maybe higher end financial services or insurance. But I think for the most part, people will content themselves with using traditional channels for most interactions, whether it's voice, web chat, email, social media.
But then, I mean, isn't it going to be? I mean, continue what Jesus was saying and what you're saying. I see this like distributed models and like the potential collaboration via the internet and everything as a boom for somebody like just doing BPO. The virtual call center work from home models have been around for like 20 plus years that I remember. And we finally got to the point where like we not only streamlined the technology to make it work, security and connectivity and bandwidth and the first models of like virtual call centers require literally a freaking T1 into everybody's house, right? Because of all the stuff that we put in there. Now you can do it through a hotspot for the most part. Yep. So this changes, right? Continue and the fact that the pandemic pushed people to have to work from home, and like Jesus was saying, figure out how to do that. I mean, do I like build a little shack outside? Do I go to WeWork? Do I go to Starbucks? Do I like threaten everyone in my family for the 5 minutes that I'm on the phone? I mean, however you handle that. But all those things coming together actually create the ability for you to deliver a much better solution, right, to your customers, and then the whole concept of like, you don't lose the people that you train, you don't lose the people that you incorporate and integrate into your team little by little. So it's quite interesting from that aspect.
Well, I think for my research, and things that we all know, people are trying to move away from the big cities, and this
That's
is
another one,
yeah, and this is not just talking about people from New York moving to Florida. Please don't go to Florida. Stay in New York, or from California to Austin. But this has been the case. People move all the time. But I think at the micro level, we see pockets of people moving from the big cities to the rural areas. It doesn't matter because taxes or whatever. People are looking quality of life. And because of that, I see, business models who are going to be merging. I see hotels, providing, sites, for BPOs, where people can come into the hotel, because they are not going to have these conferences at the hotels, Right. So, they have to turn that around and be able, they have all the big spaces, to deploy, and they already have the structure and the, the T1s, all that kind of stuff to do that. And I see them, putting subscription levels, and I see, a lot of companies selling products and services in a subscription level that will require, more AI, more machine learning, but at the very end, the human interface, as I evolve, as long as we have all these layers of security in there, and probably, 5G, whenever it starts showing up, might change that. How do you think about the 5G? Would that, because to what you were saying, Esteban, before, we bring a T1 to a house or to a location, now with hotspots. But I think the 5G is going to change that somehow.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, it's probably from a communications technology standpoint, the biggest boon that we've seen in the last while. And it's going to enable a lot of, I would say, a lot more remote working. It's going to enable, I think, a lot more gig working for people who might be in a position to perform gig type functions from, I think, Esteban, you were saying in locations like a WeWork or a cafe that would be able to accommodate these types of interactions. No question about it.
Let me go back here to the part of the culture. You have the culture from the BPO perspective, the call center culture, where people don't see that they're going to have a career, and it's a lot of turnover. And then you have, the company culture, you're providing that services to a credit card company, and you need to understand that culture of that company. How's that challenge today in order to build, and be able to provide, I'm going to go in there and be able, to create a career in the call center BPO environment after the pandemic, because it changes the whole business model. Because now you have to provide more humans, more interface, face-to-face interfaces, and you have to go out of the traditional BPO services, and maybe you have to provide, a group of people who are going to do development, and during the day are doing development, and the afternoon they might be doing, WhatsApp, How do you see that impact in the culture? I want to be the call center BPO manager, and I started, delivering packages in the BPO, or pushing out, envelopes, so the invoice will go out, to all the way down to, I want to take over, the call center and, do everything.
Look, I think you're raising a very interesting question, and something that I think, I touched on this earlier, is the fact that we've seen, not all of them, but a lot of, I would say, fairly progressive BPOs position career offerings within their own ecosystem, where if you are somebody who is perhaps coming in at the entry level, you're going to see a clear delineation in how you can move upwards. Now, certainly the pandemic and how it's disrupted the delivery, and we've seen much more levels of virtualization, I think, than ever before, than anybody certainly ever expected. That definitely, I think, is going to make a lot of these BPOs have to rethink what their career path model is going to be, because it's not going to be as evident as it would have been beforehand. That said, the extent to which I think that there's an understanding that you want to find good people and you want to keep them is going to force the outsourcing community to come up with solutions in regards to being able to identify people who are perhaps destined to be on a career path, to be able to engage with them, to be able to show them exactly what they need to do to move forward in the BPO that they're working for, that they don't necessarily have to find a career in another industry, that they can make CX, they can make customer experience something that they can do for a long time and they can excel at. The whole question is how is that going to be done in an environment where remote working is probably going to be much more of a factor than it ever has been. But guys, I would also say we're probably going to be seeing the same thing in other sectors too, where perhaps if you're a motivated college graduate, God bless you.
Thank you.
If you're, no worries. If you're a graduate and you're moving forward in an organization and you've just started out, say in the last 6 to 12 months, you've only known working from home. And I think that corporate human resources departments are going to have to figure out how they can manage career development from the angle of more of a remote delivery environment than ever before.
So saying that, I mean, do you see the trend or the reality of many of these BPOs and nearshoring companies that they want to be enablers in the digital transformation, that they want to partner with companies to be part of the digital transformation, or they're just, come over, I do your services and business as usual? How do you see that today?
I think any organization in the BPO space that plans to be around for a long time and plans to be profitable is going to have to look to try and be an enabling partner. There's just no two ways about it. The concept of your mess for less still exists with, unfortunately, a number of providers out there. I think we all know them, but I think the ones that are really the companies that if we were to be asked, who would you recommend, who would be your top 3 or 5, none of them would take that approach. They would all be taking the approach of what we can do to make sure we've got a long established relationship with the client, find out what the client's CX challenges are, and then be the enabler and be the partner that they need to overcome those and to excel in terms of generating customer loyalty. It goes back to what we were saying earlier about offshore and the whole idea about it being seen as a cheap option. An outsourcer that positions itself as a cheap option is going to get cheap clients, and they're going to be clients that won't be profitable and won't last very long.
Well, and I'm going to ask this question from the technology point of view to both of you, because talking to many of the call center providers in Latin America and the software vendors, they're seeing a push, to messaging, of course, WhatsApp, and they're seeing a push, to use AI, machine learning, from the IVR to do still the call deflections and provide the best action. Okay, how important is that? Because today at the very end, from my experience in Latin America or anywhere, you still want to talk to the human. Yeah. You still going to end up in a phone conversation. So, and that's why I asked you that question, because I knew he was going to go like this. So I'm going to throw that out. You say sure, Esteban says no. So let's go, guys.
Some people. Okay, I'll give you this. Some people would prefer to do that. How's that?
I think that's fair. I definitely think that's fair. Some people would prefer to talk to a live person. I think about somebody maybe like my dad, who's long since retired, and I think he would tell you that he finds speaking with a machine or interacting with a robot very confusing and quite frankly not very pleasant. At the same time, there's a lot of great examples where the basic elements that you might be calling about can be solved by a speech automated IVR, or you can solve them by using an digital interaction via a chatbot. I think the whole element that we need to consider as CX professionals is the concept about when you get to the point that the automated solution just can't help, or you can't find the answer on a website. And that's when that degree of frustration kicks in, that you will want to talk to somebody who might be able to provide you with some assistance. And it's a how long is a piece of string type question. At what point do you get to that? Well, it depends on the consumer, it depends on the inquiry. But this is where I think some of these really cool analytics programs, real-time analytics kick in, and they can detect when somebody is starting to get angry or they're starting to get frustrated, and they can very quickly move an individual over to a live human away from the automated solution. And that if it's done properly, can really save the day in terms of loyalty generation.
Well, the book, to give you one example, the other day, I won't mention the telco company, but, I went to their website and their machine learning chat told me to go to the store. Okay, I go to the store, I go to the guy, your chat told me to talk to you.
Yeah.
And the guy said, talk about that. Well, I need to drop a line, I need to do this. And guess what? You cannot do this over here. And then I go, oh, really? After a conversation, he picked up the phone and he talked to somebody, and then they solved my issue, but it took me, 3 hours to get that fixed, and get in a car and go to the local store to get it fixed, in order to deploy WhatsApp for Business in my phone for the API, because I was deploying that on a call center in Mexico. So it's, so that's something that, people are still forgetting that they need to connect the dots. I mean, Esteban was going like this. You said, it's feasible, but, we still need to connect the dots. And that's probably what, the BPOs, and whoever's doing the call centers, I think they have to, be sure that they connect the dots somehow, from that point of view.
But then this I'm sorry, but this talks more to the lack of CX knowledge and understanding in companies, that it talks to the BPO challenge, right? And Peter, I'm sure that what you're talking about is much better than what we see in most companies, but the fact that you focus on that much more than most companies are. So, I'm okay talking to people that are well qualified. I'm not okay wasting my time with somebody who's going to take me back to basic tech support 101 and ask me to turn the computer on and off, when I know exactly what the problem is, and I just need you to tell me where to find the fix. Right?
But this is pointing to something, Esteban, that you're mentioning that I think is bang on. I did a podcast a few weeks ago. I interviewed Jim Farnsworth from Sykes, and Jim's hypothesis, and I think he's spot on, is that when somebody eventually calls a contact center, this is actually the third or fourth line in their support journey. The odds are they've probably already gone and Googled what the issue is, or they've probably tried to go on a website, Jesus, like you were saying, to figure out what to do. By the time they get to an agent, there is no excuse and there's absolutely no patience for dealing with somebody who is substandard in terms of the qualifications, or who's going to go through a list of questions that you're going to find incredibly frustrating.
Well, that goes back to what Esteban's saying, and going back to, the question I asked you, will the BPOs be enablers, not for digital transformation, but also for CX? They need to understand the order lane, the last mile, the first mile, all the dots, so they can provide really good CX. And that goes back, Esteban, to the many, conversations that we had. Forget the experience, it's the interaction. Make sure that interaction is a good one. Because when you zoom, you add all the interactions, then eventually you're going to get a good customer experience. And those touch points, those signals that you're going to get, company needs to be in the right location with multifunctional talent, bilingual talent, people who understand the culture, you have the training, all the stuff that we'll be talking about, all that encompasses, to provide that customer experience at the very end. So That's the way I see it, you know.
Jesus, I don't want to undermine any organization, but I want to speak very broadly here. One of the things that the BPOs, I think, have tried to position themselves as are the CX professionals, and all the different elements that you're talking about in regards to what they need to provide in terms of being able to provide the right agents, the technology backbone, the first mile, the last mile. This is really their value proposition, and it's one that resonates right now. I think we've seen it over the past 12 months, because if there's one thing that we definitely saw is that a lot of enterprises, I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of enterprise CX departments weren't really well equipped to deal with disruption at the scale that we saw. And something that we've picked up in our survey work, that a report that's going to be released in a couple of weeks' time, and I think everybody will be fascinated to see that there's been a big uptick in terms of the number of enterprises across major demand markets saying that they're doing some of their work working with a BPO. And I think that comes down to the fact there's a recognition that in many cases the third parties, the CX professionals, are in a much better position to provide those processes, to provide that thought leadership, that science around CX than many enterprise contact centers have been, which, guys, I think we can all agree have been gutted in terms of their budgets over the course of the past decade. Since the global financial crisis, most CX budgets for enterprises really haven't recovered, and they're being constantly asked to do more and more and more with less and less and less.
Perfect. Well, guys, we have probably 4 more minutes to go. Any one thing, Ryan, that you will tell people if they want to look into BPOs in Latin America? What will be the one thing that they have to be alert?
I think hire you, of course.
Oh well, but that goes without saying. I would say there's a lot of different considerations, but one thing I would definitely caution anybody looking when they're selecting a spot in Latin America is be very conscious about saturation, because one of the things I think we can all agree on in our travels is that there's a lot of spots that might have an incredibly talented workforce, a great accessibility, fantastic infrastructure, but the moment you start seeing all of the different global and medium-sized as well as the domestic players setting up to try and take advantage of that, you can get yourself into an overheated situation very quickly, which can mean higher than expected costs, which can mean difficulty in terms of finding and recruiting the right people and then keeping them. And that invariably ends up impacting on how the interactions are delivered.
So, Esteban, from your perspective, what would you tell a BPO? I mean, I know that, you sort of said it before, but.
Well, and I'll say it again. I mean, it's about. I mean, Peter said it right. It's a very valid option when you actually need to do it, not for savings, but for optimizing your processes. Right? You get great talent. I mean, come on, I'm from Argentina. You find nobody like me in the US, even if you try. Okay? So you get fantastic talent in Latin. Yeah, I'm very humble. You're from Puerto Rico. I mean, who can do what we do, right? But you get fantastic talent. You get access to culture, you get access to time. Everything that Peter said is right, but it needs to be a strategic option, and you need to consider as part of your experience. You can't just say, throw over the wall and let it be somebody else's problem. It needs to be a very well thought out plan and a strategic move if you're going to do it, and think end-to-end experiences. Like Peter said, I get to talk to a person. I'm not happy about that appointment. I already tried everything that I know, and I've been through everywhere. So make sure that it's a rescue operation, not just a money-saving operation.
Perfect. So very good insights. I mean, we talk about proximity to the United States, same time zones, multifunctional locations, education, training, culture. What is the added value of doing CX? Definitely, and we know for sure that Esteban doesn't want to talk to somebody. That we end out already. You can talk to us, not somebody else. Yeah. But those are valid points, and I think the interaction, by the time you get to that third phone call or that third chat, you already know what you want. You already know how to solve it. So at the very end, you need to be sure that you have that customer experience properly. Besides, having that person that's going to help you to reduce the cost in your call center, you need to add that value. So I think that's very compelling. So, Peter, I really, thank you to be part of this conversation today. It's been already 50 minutes, so it's
flown by.
So we have Peter Ryan from Ryan Strategic Advisory. You can find him on LinkedIn as Peter Ryan. It's easy to find, or you can do a Google. Definitely, you're going to see it. Peter Ryan, BPO, you will find him. Esteban Kolsky, well, he's only in LinkedIn. He's not out there. He's a ghost, but you can find him on LinkedIn. Definitely. You can definitely find him on LinkedIn. So
my advantage is I have a very, very unique name that nobody else in the world shares. So you can always find me when you look me up.
That could be a good thing or a bad thing.
A bad thing. Yeah, exactly.
I'll take the fifth.
Okay, so this has been Jesus Hoyos, Conversaciones de CRM with Esteban and Peter. Just a reminder, we're going to come back next week. I won't have Tomando Café con Jesus Hoyos this week. It's Semana Santa. But see you next week, and thank you very much for joining us. Hasta la próxima.
Hasta la próxima.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Esteban.